It started on a Sunday afternoon, the kind that pretends to be calm until someone decides to break the peace. My father had called a family meeting, which was never a good sign. Every time he said those words, something unfair was about to be announced under the illusion of what's best for everyone. We were all sitting in the living room, the same one filled with framed pictures of my sister, Elise, and her 2 children. My photos, conveniently, were smaller and tucked in the corners of the shelf, like I was a relative who'd wandered into someone else's home. My father stood near the fireplace, his voice carrying that tone he used when pretending he'd already thought everything through. "It's decided," Dad announced, his hands clasped behind his back. "Your sister gets your luxury SUV, she has kids." The room went quiet for a beat, then the approval started nods, soft murmurs of agreement, the same tired sympathy for Elise that had followed her for years. She was the golden one, the one who needed more help, the one whose mistakes were excused before they even happened. I sat back, pretending to think it over, but I already knew what I was going to do. Elise smiled, that tight, practiced smile that looked like gratitude but felt like victory. "Thanks, Dad," she said softly, touching his arm. "It'll really help with the school drop-offs." My father turned to me with that expectant look. "You understand, right, Callie? You don't need such a big car now that you live alone, and your job doesn't require much driving." Everyone looked at me, waiting for my approval because that's how it always went. They would make decisions for me, and I'd be expected to agree politely, like the dutiful daughter who didn't cause waves, but not this time. I set my phone down, reached for the folder I'd placed on the table, and smiled. "Funny you should mention kids," I said. "Here's what Elise did with her last car." I opened the folder and slid a set of printed papers across the table. Uncle Ron, who was seated near me, leaned in first. His eyes widened, then he gasped. Elise froze. Dad's face lost color. The papers were from the insurance company records of a claim Elise had made 6 months ago after her accident. Except it wasn't an accident. The car had been written off because she'd used it to secretly Uber around town for cash while telling everyone she was too overwhelmed to work. When the car was totaled, she blamed her ex, saying he had driven it into a tree. Except the dashcam footage said otherwise. If you're listening to this on her Retaliation, don't forget to subscribe because sometimes revenge doesn't need fire or fury. Sometimes it just needs proof. "Where did you get that?" Elise demanded, her voice tight, almost cracking. "Your insurance company accidentally copied me on an email," I said calmly. Since the car was registered under the family trust, remember, the one I helped Dad set up, that means technically I had a right to review the file. My father's mouth opened, then closed. "Elise, is this true?" Elise laughed, that nervous, fake kind of laugh. "Oh my God, Dad, it's nothing. She's exaggerating. I was helping out a friend. The car wasn't. The footage shows you driving with paying passengers." I interrupted softly. "And the report lists the damages total. You collected $18,400 in the settlement, and you told Dad your ex wrecked it." A heavy silence filled the room. Uncle Ron cleared his throat. "You lied, Elise," she stammered. It's complicated." Dad's face tightened. He looked at me as if I'd betrayed him by bringing the truth to light. "You didn't need to humiliate your sister in front of everyone, Callie." I smiled. "No, Dad. I just needed to remind you that fairness shouldn't depend on who cries louder." That night, I drove home in my SUV and replayed everything in my head. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd stopped expecting fairness from them long ago. What I wanted now was balance. For years, my family had treated me like a safety net, the responsible one, the stable one, the one who'd bail everyone out. My sister, meanwhile, coasted on emotional manipulation. When she wanted something, she'd get it. When I wanted something, I was told to be understanding. But they didn't know one thing. I had spent the last 2 years learning how to invest, how to build credit, how to manage money in ways they never cared to understand. They'd made me small by taking things, but now I had something they couldn't touch, power, and I was about to use it. 2 weeks later, Elise called. "I just wanted to talk," she said hesitantly. "Dad's really upset. He said you embarrassed him in front of everyone." "Did I?" I replied, pretending to sound curious. "Or did he embarrass himself by giving away something that wasn't his to give?" She sighed. "Can't we just move on, Callie? It's just a car." "Exactly," I said, "so move on." That silence on the other end, the kind where the person realizes they've lost leverage that was worth more than any apology. But it didn't end there. Oh no, families like mine don't just let go. The next month, I got a text from Dad. "We're doing some restructuring of the trust. You'll need to sign a few things." I knew what that meant. He wanted me to transfer some of the assets to Elise's side again, the same old trick. But this time I was ready. When I arrived at his office, the lawyer slid a packet toward me. Your father just needs you to authorize a redistribution, he said, looking nervous. I flipped through the papers. They were sneaky buried in legal jargon, was a clause that would hand control of several properties over to Elise under the pretext of maintenance and tax simplification. I smiled faintly. I'll take these home, I said. I never sign anything on the spot. The lawyer looked relieved. Of course, M.S. Mercer. At home, I made a few calls, one to a friend who worked in property law, another to my accountant. By the end of the week, the trust was rewritten by me. I consolidated my assets into a new entity, one they couldn't access without my direct signature. Then I quietly sent Dad and Elise a courtesy email. To avoid confusion, I've moved my investments and vehicle assets under a separate account. Please ensure any future documents reflect this change. It was polite, professional, but it hit them harder than any confrontation ever could. Because for the first time, I had separated my life and my wealth from theirs. The fallout came slowly. First, Elise's husband lost his job. Then her mortgage ballooned. She came knocking, tearful, asking if I could help with a small loan until things get better. I offered her tea. I listened. And then, very calmly, I said, Elise, I think it's time you learn to live within your means. I did. She left without finishing her tea. But the real revenge came 6 months later at my father's birthday dinner. Everyone was there again, pretending everything was fine. Elise had just finished talking about how tough times had hit them, but she was staying positive. Then Dad cleared his throat. Callie, he said, I hope there are no hard feelings about before. Family matters more than money, right? I raised my glass, of course. I said smoothly, that's why I made sure our family business stays safe from bad financial decisions. He blinked. What do you mean? I took a small envelope from my purse and slid it across the table. That's the quarterly statement from the trust. You'll notice I sold off one of the rental properties last month, the one Elise was using as collateral for her personal loan. The room went still. Elise's fork dropped. You what? She whispered. Sold it. I said evenly, you were using it without authorization. I just corrected that mistake. Her face drained. You ruined everything. No, I replied. I just stopped cleaning up your mess. Elise's chair screeched backward as she stood. You sold the property without telling me. It wasn't yours to begin with, I said. It was part of the family trust, remember. I simply followed the clause you ignored when you mortgaged it. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Around the table, everyone looked everywhere but at her. My father cleared his throat. You didn't have the right to act unilaterally, Callie. I had every right. The trust documents gave me managing control after Mom passed. You were copied on the email, Dad. He frowned, as though realizing the email he'd ignored was now a landmine. I must have missed it. That seems to happen a lot when money's involved. The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of silverware from the children's table. Elise's husband shifted uncomfortably. Let's not fight in front of the kids, he muttered. Oh, they'll be fine, I said. They're used to watching adults pretend lies are love. That ended dinner. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. First from Dad, then from Uncle Ron, then from Elise herself. I let them ring. Around noon, a final message arrived. You've gone too far. Come fix this before the family name is dragged through the mud. I almost laughed. Fix this. The irony nearly choked me. Instead of replying, I forwarded the message to my attorney with a short note. Please file notice of property transfer with county records today. Priority processing. Then I shut my phone off and went for a run. By the time I came back, I felt lighter, like cutting one more tie had made breathing easier. Over the next week, whispers began to circle through town. Elise's mortgage company called the trust office, confused about collateral that no longer existed. Her husband's employer, who happened to be a friend of mine from college, mentioned offhand at lunch that Elise had some messy loan situation. I smiled politely and said, I hope she figures it out. By Friday, she finally showed up at my door. Her hair was unbrushed, eyes red, rimmed. You ruined everything. She hissed before I could speak. I corrected an error. I replied evenly, you mortgaged property without authorization. I sold it to prevent legal action. It's all documented. You don't understand. We were going to pay it back. With what? I asked softly. The money from the SUV you tried to take from me. She blinked, furious tears pooling. Why do you hate me so much? I sighed. I don't hate you, Elise. I just finally stopped letting you take. She stepped back as though I'd slapped her, then turned and ran down the driveway. If you're still listening on her retaliation, you already know this wasn't about money anymore. It was about ending the pattern, quietly, legally, completely. A few weeks later, I received a formal notice. Dad wanted mediation. Typical. He'd always been more concerned about appearances than accountability. I agreed, partly because I wanted a record of everything. The mediation took place in a downtown office tower. Dad came in wearing his courtroom expression, stern, self-righteous, certain he'd talk circles around everyone. Elise sat beside him, pale and jumpy. The mediator, an older woman with calm eyes, asked us each to explain our side. I went last. I didn't sell the property out of spite. I began. I sold it because it was misused. The trust was created to secure generational assets, not to subsidize personal spending. My sister has repeatedly used shared property for private loans. The SUV, the insurance payout, the fake repair claims, all documented. Elise flinched. Dad shot her a look. Is that true? She's twisting everything. Elise snapped. I slid a thumb drive across the table. Full audit. Bank records, emails, insurance statements. The mediator plugged it in, scanned through the folders, then turned slowly to Dad. Mr. Mercer, these are serious irregularities. Your daughter acted within her fiduciary role. Dad's jaw tightened. You don't speak to me like that. I'm not speaking as your daughter right now. I interrupted. I'm speaking as the managing trustee. Which means, legally, your approval isn't required for protective transactions. For the first time in my life, my father had no words. After the session, the mediator asked if we wanted to resolve privately. I looked at Elise. That depends. Are you done using our mother's trust as your personal piggy bank? Elise stared at the floor. I can't believe you do this to family. You already did it to family. I said, I just stopped you. The mediator cleared her throat gently. Let's note that as resolution in principle. And just like that, it was done. Weeks passed. Spring turned to summer. My phone stayed quiet except for work. I bought a small lake cabin outside town, somewhere peaceful where I could think. One evening, as I watched the sunset over the water, an email arrived from Uncle Ron. Callie, for what it's worth, you did the right thing. Your father's pride will take time. Cool, but some of us are proud of you. I smiled for the first time in months. Someone had finally said it. The next part of my revenge wasn't intentional. It was simply consequence. Elise's financial chaos spilled into public record. When a property changes ownership, filings become searchable. Her creditors found them, realized her collateral was gone, and demanded repayment. The story spread through local circles faster than wildfire. Suddenly, the woman who'd always been the perfect mother was whisper fodder at every brunch table. I never said a word. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on my consulting business. Clients liked working with someone calm, organized, discreet. By midsummer, I had more contracts than I could handle. My revenue tripled. One evening, I spotted Dad outside my office building. He looked smaller somehow, his confidence worn down. Callie, he said. Quietly, can we talk? I nodded. We sat on a nearby bench overlooking the plaza fountain. I know things got messy. He began. I might have handled it wrong. I waited. He rubbed his forehead. I didn't realize how much responsibility you'd taken on. Your mother always said you'd be the strong one. I guess I expected you to keep being the peacemaker. I'm tired of being the peacemaker. I said I just wanted fairness. He nodded slowly. Your sister's lost a lot. Maybe this will teach her. It's not about teaching her, Dad. It's about boundaries. He looked up, eyes glassy. You sound like your mother. For a moment, silence sat between us, heavy but not hostile. Then he stood. Take care of yourself, Callie. I am, I said, and he walked away. Months later, I heard Elise had moved in with a friend after selling her house. Her husband had left. The loans had swallowed everything. Sometimes I wondered if she blamed me. But the truth was, I hadn't taken anything from her. She'd taken from herself every time she chose deceit over honesty. I didn't feel joy about it, just relief. One Friday night, I received a small envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single folded note. You were right. I read it twice, then set it in my desk drawer. No need to reply. Some admissions only matter once. If you're listening on her retaliation, remember, sometimes revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's documentation, patience, and the quiet decision never to be used again. The next morning, I packed my bags and drove to the lake cabin for good. I traded the city noise for birdsong, the chaos for calm, the SUVs still mine, glinted in the sunrise as I parked it under the pines. I brewed coffee, stepped onto the porch, and breathed in the crisp air. For the first time, I realized that revenge hadn't been about getting even. It had been about reclaiming space, financial, emotional, spiritual. Some debts, after all, can't be paid in dollars. I'd been at the lake cabin for Almost 3 months when the call came. It was a Thursday morning, sunlight spilling over the water like liquid gold. I was sitting at the table, sipping coffee and going through client reports, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something told me to answer. Callie Mercer, a voice asked sharp, professional. "This is Detective Lang from the County Sheriff's Department." My chest tightened. "Yes, there's been an incident involving your father." The air seemed to leave the room. What kind of incident? "He's fine," the detective said quickly. "Just a minor accident." He listed you as his emergency contact. Relief flooded me, followed immediately by guilt for the part of me that had hesitated. "I'll be there in 2 hours," I said. The hospital was quiet when I arrived, that sterile kind of silence that always makes you whisper. I found Dad sitting up in a bed, arm in a sling, scratches across his face. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. "Well," he muttered when he saw me, "didn't expect you to drive all the way out here." "You listed me as your emergency contact," I said softly. He gave a tired shrug. "Guess I knew you'd actually show up." A moment neither of us spoke. Then he sighed. "It was a stupid fall. Elise was supposed to come by and help with some paperwork, but—" He trailed off, "but she didn't." I finished. He nodded slowly. "She hasn't spoken to me in months." Said I took your side. I looked at the Roman 4 in his arm, the monitor blinking softly. Maybe sides were the wrong way to think about it. He gave a weak laugh. "You sound like your mother again." "She had sense," I said. "She had patience," he corrected. "You have precision." That made me smile. "I'll take that." We talked for an hour, about small things mostly. The nurse came in to check his vitals, and when she left, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Callie," he said quietly, "I've been rewriting the trust. You'll get controlling interest when I pass." I blinked. "What about Elise? She already got more than enough chances." I hesitated. "I don't want it all, Dad. I just wanted fairness." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why you're the one who should have it." For the first time in years, there was peace between us, thin and fragile, but real. That night, I stayed at a motel near the hospital. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a message. "Unknown number, you ruined my life, and now you're ruining his too. Don't think this is over." It was Elise. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "It was over the day you chose lies over family. Take care of yourself, Elise." Then I blocked her number and went to sleep. 2 days later, Dad was discharged, and I drove him home. He refused a wheelchair, insisted he could walk, and complained the entire way like old times. At his house, he paused in the doorway. "Strange," he murmured, "feels empty." "Maybe it's time to fill it with better things," I said. He nodded slowly. "Maybe it is." A few weeks passed. I returned to the cabin, resumed work, tried to find a rhythm. But peace has a strange weight. When you've lived in constant battle, quiet can feel suspicious. One afternoon, I received a letter forwarded from Dad's lawyer. Inside was a single-page notice. "Elise Mercer has filed for bankruptcy protection." I set it down and leaned back in my chair. My stomach turned, not out of victory but sadness. I thought of the sister I'd shared a bedroom with as kids, the one who used to braid my hair, who taught me how to sneak cookies from the jar. Somewhere along the way, greed had hollowed her out. That night, I took a long walk down by the lake. The moon reflected across the water like a silver road. I realized then that revenge hadn't just ended something. It had freed me to start again. The next morning, I called Dad. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Better," he said. "I'm even thinking about selling the old house. Too many memories. That might be good." I said, "Start fresh." There was a pause. "You'd help with that?" "Of course. I'll call the realtor tomorrow." But he never did. A week later, I got another call from the hospital again. This time, there was no accident. He'd passed quietly in his sleep. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear even after the nurse's voice faded. My father, flawed, stubborn, prideful, was gone. I didn't cry right away. I just sat down at the table and stared at the wall, feeling something break loose inside me. Something small but deep. When I finally did cry, it wasn't for what we'd lost, but for all the years wasted pretending. Everything was fine. The funeral was small. Elise showed up in black sunglasses, hair pulled back tight. She didn't speak to me, and I didn't try. The lawyer read the will the next week. Just as Dad had said, I inherited controlling interest in the trust, the lake property, and the remaining assets. Elise received a single bequest, a small life insurance policy, and a note handwritten by Dad. "You taught me how fragile family can be. I hope you learn how to rebuild one day." She tore it up right there in the office. When she stormed out, the lawyer looked at me and said quietly, "You've handled all this with more grace than most. Grace? I asked. It doesn't feel like that. Then maybe it's strength, he said. After everything settled, I decided to do something my father never had the courage to. Close the chapter completely. I sold the family home and donated half the proceeds to a foundation that funded medical care for underprivileged children, the same kind of surgery my daughter once needed when my parents refused to help. When the receipt came through, I smiled. That was the real closure. Months passed peacefully. Work thrived, my daughter flourished, and I began writing again. Short essays, little reflections about boundaries, resilience, and family dynamics. I never mentioned names, but readers connected. One afternoon, while recording a new episode for her Retaliation, I told my audience, people think revenge is fire. That it burns hot and fast, but real revenge, quiet, patient revenge is water. It erodes stone slowly. It doesn't destroy what's in front of you. It reveals what was always weak. The comments flooded in, thousands of listeners sharing stories of betrayal and healing. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. One evening, as I was editing the episode, there was a knock at the door. My daughter, 12 now, looked up from her homework. "Who's that, Mom?" I opened the door to find Elise standing there. She looked human again. No makeup, no armor, just tired. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." She held out an envelope. "This isn't a trick. I just needed to give you something." Inside was an old photograph of us as kids, arms around each other in matching dresses. On the back, in faded ink, our mother's handwriting read, "Take care of each other." Elise's voice broke. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to have that." I studied her face. For the first time in years, I didn't see my enemy. I saw my sister, the girl who once saved me from bullies, who used to make me laugh until my stomach hurt. "I already forgave you," I said softly. "I just didn't tell you." She started to cry. "I messed up everything." "No." It said, "You learned the hardest way possible." "That's different." We stood there for a long moment, silence filling the space between us like something sacred. Then she nodded, whispered "thank you," and turned to leave. As she walked down the path toward the car, I realized something unexpected. Revenge hadn't just rebuilt me. It had rebuilt the truth. Later that night, I recorded one final message for the channel. When people wrong you, it's tempting to want fire. To want them to hurt, to fall, to lose. But sometimes the best revenge is simply survival. The kind that turns pain into purpose. If you're listening right now and someone's made you feel small, remember this. You don't have to burn them to stand taller. You just have to stop kneeling. I paused, then smiled softly into the mic. This is Callie from her Retaliation, signing off for now. Because sometimes the best endings aren't revenge at all. They're release. The next morning, I woke up early and drove to the lake. Mist hovered over the water like smoke, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing on me. I stood on the dock, watching the sun rise, and whispered, "It's over." And it truly was.